Hello, thank you everyone for coming. I'm Lisa Parnell Rowe. I'm the Development Services Director here with the City of Hastings. We are lucky enough to have our consultant team for the comprehensive plan here, Marvin Consultants, and team is here. I'll have them individually introduce themselves. They're largely going to be the ones presenting to you tonight on exactly what the steps are involved in the comprehensive plan and what what's going to happen over the next few months. And so I'm just going to let them go ahead and introduce themselves.
Thank you, Lisa. Let's see here. I've been told the clock is running, so I'm going to take this out because I like to walk. Good evening and thank you for coming, everyone. My name is Keith Marvin. I'm the president and founder of Marvin Planning Consultants. We are based out of David City, Nebraska. A little background, I've been at this for about 30 years and been a consultant the entire time. So we're happy and we're very excited that we've been selected to work with the city and all the community residents on this important project. So we're going to start off and see if I can make this thing work. There we go. So introductions, and I'm going to make them come over here and introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Mason. Mason's part of my team.
Hey everybody, I'm Mason Herman. I'm with Marvin Planning Consultants. I have been with Keith for about a year. I love the city of Hastings. My wife is right up there in attendance, and because of her, I'm really excited that we got a chance to get to work with the city. So.
Hi, good evening. My name is Aaron Sorrell. I'm with Community Planning Insights. We are a firm out of Dayton, Ohio, and I have spent about half of my career on the public side of the table and private as well. In addition to doing consulting work, I'm also the interim planning director for a town of about 45,000 just north of Dayton. I'll be focusing on the housing side of this project. Thanks, sir.
Hello, good evening. Chris Jansen with MSA Professional Services. I'm a planner, team leader at MSA. I have about 5 planners working underneath me as different stages in their career. I've been doing corridor plans, that kind of thing. But what I'm very, very excited about is being brought onto this team by Keith here is to help out with public engagement. We've had an exciting week. It's been great. We had a great tour this morning. And we're ready to get started. So, thank you.
Thank you, guys. So with that, we'll get underway. So the complete project here, there's 2 parts to this, well, 3 parts to this project. I got to wait for it to catch up. First part of this is to deal with the entire comprehensive plan, and we'll talk about the different elements that go into a comprehensive plan throughout the next hour or so. The other part of this is the Housing Needs Strategic Implementation Plan, which is required by state law for towns the size of Hastings. And I believe, Lisa, that's due, next spring or something like that for you guys? And that would be one of the things that Aaron is directly involved with. One of the projects Aaron and I all have done together was we had the pleasure of also working on the housing needs assessment for the city of Hastings a couple of years ago. So we're very familiar with the housing situation in the city and are looking forward to diving into it in more detail. So the project approach. This is just going to be a quick list and then we'll get into detail. So first thing that's going to be involved is a community assessment. And one of the things that I've started doing is on the community assessment side is, if any of you are familiar with AARP, they have a program out there that rates communities by livability. So we'll start with some of those criteria, and we'll start looking at, one, what they say about Hastings, see where they think that some of the needs are, and we'll move forward from there and kind of create kind of an executive summary of the actual community assessment, or the community at large. The introduction chapter, then we'll talk about community engagement, population, housing, economic development, parks and rec, which, you know, I've been working in this town for a while, off and on for the last couple of decades. Until this week, I've always known you had nice parks, but I had no clue just how fantastic these parks are as we've gone through and driven through the community. We're going to look at community facilities, public safety, public health, your communication and utilities, and energy. And that's required by state law. And then hazards. So then we're going to dive into what everybody knows about a comp plan, that's land use. We're going to start taking everything we've seen, everything we've heard, and start developing a land use policies for the city of Hastings for the next 10 to 20 years. So it'll be very important in order for the community to be involved in this, so that we represent what we hear and what people want in this community. And then implementation, and then we'll update the zoning and subdivision regulations at the end of the project. So I briefly gave you an idea of community assessment. I won't go into a lot of detail, but these are just essentially looking at quality of life issues. Your introduction. This is a very basic section. It's going to talk to you why, or tell people why a comprehensive plan is important, what the state statutes say about it, and it's going to give you a little bit of the history of the community as well. This is kind of a catch-all that doesn't tend to fit anywhere else within the document. The next part that we're going to talk about is going to be the critical part of this whole process. And that is community engagement. I threw this up in another community here recently, and I'm going to ask a question. How many of you in here are computer savvy? Okay. Well, those of you who are, please volunteer to help those people that aren't. Because this is going to be a two-step process, but a lot of the good stuff is going to be done digitally, unfortunately. We're going to be set up through our Facebook page. We're going to deal with this off the city's website. We're going to use SurveyMonkey. And that's a digital process by which you can answer specific questions about how you feel about Hastings. And then we're going to get into a different program called Mind Mixer. I like to promote these guys. They are a Nebraska group of guys that came up with this idea 15, 20 years ago. This is an online engagement process. We can throw out a question, and if you sign up for an account, and you can use a pseudonym, but you have to give us your real name when you sign up, but you also then have a pseudonym as you participate. You can actually carry on a conversation about ideas on this website. And we can actually start tracking people and assign points. And when we start assigning points, there's a reason for that, because we're going to, in the long run, reward somebody for the most participation or potentially the best idea as voted on by all the participants. So this is driven by the community and the people that are involved in it. We met with Planning Commission over lunch today. We got asked the question. This is hopefully going to be a productive tool, and we don't want to deal with things where people are pointing fingers or anything like that. So we will reserve the right to start dealing with some of that as necessary. So, but it is critical. We want good, solid ideas. So in person, we've already started this week. We've had 3 or 4 focus group meetings already. We've met with different groups. We're going to meet with more when we come out again, probably in October, and start dealing with other focus groups. And we're going to do community-wide meetings. So we're going to get hopefully get big groups of people in these different community locations, and we're going to start dealing with it, dealing with what you want to talk about in those meetings and look to the future. The other thing is we're going to be signed up for the Saturday side of things on Kool-Aid days. Chris and Mason and I are going to be set up in a tent or awning or whatever we call those, pop-up.
Tailgate tent.
Tailgate tent. Yeah. And we'll be there to answer questions and promote this project. And we're going to have some materials to hand out so people can be involved and know how to start using the digital engagement. So if you are very interested in this, I hope you are, because you're here tonight, tell people about it and have them stop by, because we'd love to talk to them about it. So probably the most critical thing in this whole process is population. Population drives everything that happens in this community. It drives your workforce, it drives your housing needs, it drives your need for parks, it drives your needs for schools, everything. So we take a hard look at how that whole thing, how your population is functioning in many different categories. We're not going to just look at what the trends are through the population for the last several decades. We're going to break that down, and we're going to look at things from the standpoint of ethnicity, what's called cohorts or age groups. We're going to find out what age groups are moving in, moving out, and we'll be able to give you an idea of what dynamic you're seeing with regard to your population. So, just to give you a little idea, this is your population trend for the since 1930. So you've seen some growth, you've seen a little bit of flatlining of it towards the last few decades, but it's been seeing mostly growth. Slow but steady growth. In the next section, I'm going to turn this over to Aaron a little bit. I'm going to wake him up.
Yeah, so the next chapter will either be, there'll be a housing chapter in the comprehensive plan and then also a standalone document of the Affordable Housing Action Plan. So I love working in Nebraska. From a planning perspective, it is one of the most forward-thinking states in the union. In Ohio, planning it's a nicety, but a lot of times it's not required to do things. So it is refreshing to come out here to work. One of the things that changed at the state legislature level was the mandate of an affordable housing action plan, which really dives into how each community is going to strive to address their housing needs. If the plan is not created on time, it kind of throws your zoning code into havoc. So this will be a document that is on time, and we'll look at very much like the population projections, but instead of looking at populations, we're looking at households, where it's going over the next 5, 10, 15 years, where the gaps are. You know you need housing, you know your housing's expensive. That's not something new. So we'll be taking deep dives into that, looking at housing by tenure, renter versus owner, looking at housing needs by income, also taking into account the employers that are planned to come in here and the housing challenges that they may face because retention is an issue. We're also going to look at what you're losing as far as residents living in Grand Island and commuting here or living elsewhere, and how do we capture those individuals to be, you're working here but living elsewhere, how do we capture them to become part of the Hastings community? So we'll also update the housing study, housing needs study that we did in 2020 with recent data, also looking at what was accomplished over the last few years, and then kind of tune that up for the next 5-year look. So.
Thank you, Aaron. So that is a major part of what happens, especially in your community, because of what your needs are. But it's also driving the next one, and that's economics. You're having an issue with workforce and getting enough workforce, and a lot of that's being driven by not enough housing and not enough housing at a workforce affordability level. So those are things that we have to look at. Economically, we're going to look at all the different types of indicators that will happen, what's happening with your local businesses, your industries. We're going to look at retail trade. We're going to look at, what we call basic, non-basic, and that the simple terms is exports versus non-exports when it comes to the labor market. So we're going to try to determine what different sectors based upon census data is actually seeing an exportation of goods and services throughout this community. The other thing that came up in one of our focus groups is we are going to take a look at this not just from a standpoint of Hastings, but how do you look at this from a standpoint of the Tri-City area? And what is your position within the Tri-Cities? So I think that's important. Some of you know that are here that we are also working with Grand Island. So we've got access to good data there too. So we just need to be able to pull some of the data from Kearney, and we can have a pretty good analysis of where everything is working and the dynamics are. So one of the things that Aaron didn't touch on, and I talk about this on the end at when we talked about all the different sections, and that's implementation. One of the things that you'll find as we put these together is we're not going to throw you out a big implementation chapter at the end that has all these different tables and goals and objectives and our strategies or work items that need to be completed at the end. We're going to take the pertinent ones and we're going to put them into individual chapters like housing and economics. So if I'm interested in housing, I can go grab that data out of the comp plan, and I can also have all of the goals and policies that were developed through the comp plan in there. The same with economic development. So, as I mentioned, you got a fantastic park system. And I've got a line in here that shouldn't have been in here, but, we're going to look at all your other studies too, but transportation and parking may not have a whole lot to do with this, so there's a typo in here, I apologize, but we're going to look at your existing parks. We're going to look at them from the standpoint of size, location, and then we're going to start comparing them to some basic standards across the country that are out there by different organizations, and we'll start identifying where you might have gaps in your needs on different types of recreation so that you can pull that in and deal with that as well. And we'll also be dealing with the Parks and Rec Director very heavily throughout this whole process of this chapter. Again, the goals, policies, and stuff will be here. And like I said, population's critical. So when we start looking at standards for parks, population's what's going to drive those. What is the demand based upon your population and the population of different areas of the community? We're going to look at community facilities. This facility is a city-owned facility. It would be either under community facilities or, in my mind, it would be under Parks and Rec too, potentially. But we're going to look at City Hall, museums, and other types of facilities that aren't covered elsewhere in the document. And we'll also, again, start looking at what are the standards for these facilities, what do you need long-term. The old days we used to put public safety in with community facilities. In my mind, it is probably one of the important chapters to look at. We're going to look at your law enforcement numbers. We're going to look at numbers such as with your police force, they report annually to the Crime Commission in the state the number of sworn officers on board that are employed. And they take a look at this from a standpoint of how many officers are employed per 1,000 people. What that does is then starts allowing us to look at comparisons to other communities to see where you stand and get a good idea. We're also going to look at fire and rescue. We're going to look at emergency management. These are all part of the public safety section. Something new that we're talking about, and this is not going to talk about mandates on masks or not mandates on masks, but how can planning and land use do a better job of dealing with public health if we run into another pandemic in the future? So what did we learn from this last 2.5 years through land use, and what do we need to do better as we move forward? This will be heavily discussed with Mary Lanning and a few other the local health departments, but we also will have people give us their thoughts and opinions as well. Public health, this is more, like I said, more than just that. This also deals with mental health. If you watch anything with regard to unfortunately the Royals, because they're not very good right now, but there's a big push with the Royals and Blue Cross Blue Shield and a few other people about mental health. So it's a lot of people that you don't know about that are impacted by this. Communications, utilities, and energy. We're going to talk about all your communication facilities, your TV stations, your newspaper, everything that you have going for you to help people get communications and their news. We're going to talk heavily with the utility department and the city engineer to find out the important things that need to be dealt with, because if there's no pipe, it's hard to grow. And if the pipe's expensive to put there, it's hard to grow. So we need to identify areas that would be better to grow based upon how the services can be provided across the community. Hazards. This chapter is probably the easiest one to write, because we go into your most current hazard mitigation plan. How many of you know that the city is involved somewhere with a hazard mitigation plan? Okay, we got a few. So, those goals and policies within the hazard mitigation plan can have an impact on land use decisions as well. So we put those, we're going to pull that stuff in out of there that's pertinent to Hastings, and we're going to identify those. What I like about doing this, is hazard mitigation plans are required to be updated every 5 years. Otherwise, you're not eligible for funds from FEMA potentially. I don't care if you don't call me as a consultant, but what I think it does is it creates a need for the city to at least update and take a look at one of their chapters at a maximum every 5 years to make sure things are in order. Now we get into this wonderful thing called land use. What's going to go where? What puzzle piece goes where to make it work, and what's the puzzle piece next to it? So I mean, these are important things. You've got a lot of different things. The conversations that we've had the last few days, heard a lot of discussion about, I don't want to dive into this path, but the Racino. And if, the land use is appropriate or not, we need to take a look at those types of things so that in my world, what we call trying to give somebody what we call the golden yes. How do you get to yes on something that could be potentially good for your community, but may or may not be in a right place? We're going to evaluate what's there. Part of what Aaron does with the housing stuff is going to be brought into this and deal with missing middle, which will then drive into the zoning side. Transportation. You're just wrapping up a transportation and parking study. I know Lisa and I talked back and forth during the proposal part. She goes, well, we've got that already. I said, yeah, but there's going to be things that come out in this process that we need to make sure that we document and bring forward that may or may not be in that study. So that's what a lot of this is going to be. It's not going to go back and rewrite that document, but it's going to build off of that document. Implementation, like I said, it's going to be driven by what we hear, and it's going to be mostly a chapter by chapter basis instead of at one big thing at the end. The biggest tool, though, for implementation of your comp plan is your zoning regulations, your subdivision regulations. I know for a fact that you've had issues with your zoning for a long time. There's a lot of things that need to be dealt with. That's what we're here to do, is help you work through those, and let's make it so it's a lot easier. I'm a firm believer in making the process as painless as possible and making it as user-friendly as possible so that you can go through this document, see what you can and can't do, and you've got a good understanding of it at the beginning. And one of the things I love to do is every time I've seen things go through the Board of Adjustment, is there a way to deal with that outside of the Board of Adjustment and put it into your regulation so it's allowed by the administrative approval process? You just get too many the ideal situation on the Board of Adjustment is they'll never meet. So, public involvement. This is where you folks come in. This is important. I showed you the different ways that we're going to do the public participation. But public involvement is critical to a successful project. What I want when we get done with this plan is to go in front of Planning Commission and City Council, and I want to see 100 people in the room saying, this is good. We like this. This is done to what we thought needed to be done. Instead of 100 people sitting there saying, no, this is a terrible idea. So we can only do, as consultants, we can only do as good as what we hear from you folks through this process. So it's really important for you to get involved. Now, how do you get involved? Well, we had people this week. We've asked them to be a part of a focus group. They said yes. If you get asked to be a part of a focus group, please say yes. Anything that we say or we discuss in those meetings, and as I told Lisa and Brian when we started these, staff is purposely, city officials for the most part, are not typically invited to these so that we can have an open and honest conversation. And all of that stays in that room. We don't say, well, such and such said this, but we may take that as that information as a group and bring it back forward to make sure people understand what's being said. If you're asked to do an in-person meeting, so if one of us says, can you do a Zoom meeting with us for 15, 20 minutes? Please say yes. Because you've been identified as somebody that's important to deal with. And the one member of the team I didn't introduce, that's in the back of the room, Chase Wheeler from 281 Studios. Chase is going to be with us also at Kool-Aid Days. And he's also going to have his camera. So if you're out there and you're a citizen, and he walks up to you by our booth and says, do you have a couple minutes to answer a couple questions? Please say yes. Now, some of it may be used on our website because we're going to have stuff where people give us things and feedback on our website. So I'm hoping that people who do that are willing to do that for us because I think it's important. We've gone through, what, Chase, about 8 or 9 interviews with key people at the city level this last few days, getting their thoughts on planning and the process. They're going to be on a video that's going to be on our website. And then finally, engage in the digital formats. MindMixer is going to be that main thing that we're going to do other than SurveyMonkey. Take photographs. The website's going to be set up so that if you see something that's good, that needs to be dealt with or protected, something that needs to be fixed, or something that's just hideous, we're calling it the good, the bad, and the ugly. You're able to take photographs and tell us where it's at and post it on there so we can have the issue. That's also the other thing with MindMixer is we can ask you, okay, one of the things that we keep hearing is everybody likes the small town feel and environment of Hastings. My question is, what is the small town environment? What is that to people? You can also, through MindMixer, if we ask you that question, you can give us a verbal comment on it, but you can also upload a picture that we can say, okay, that's what this person likes, and then people can also then start talking about that as well, as far as, yeah, I agree, this says a lot right here, or no, here's a better example. So we can have that dialogue. So, plus there's a program we're going to be dealing with called Crowdsource Mapping. I'm going to let Mason talk a little bit about that and a little bit about the website real quick, and then we'll get on to a couple other things.
All right, so I want to repeat something Keith said earlier. If there's those of you out there that aren't good with computers or prefer to not work with them, please help those that need help with that, because we are going to do a lot of our engagement digitally, but we're also going to do a lot of it not digitally, with the in-person meetings. The survey that will be on the website is also going to be, we'll have physical copies laying around. You can fill it out, bring it back on your own time, and we'll upload it to the SurveyMonkey website. So, but what we're going to do is we're putting together a website where we can put everything that we have worked on. So this whole process is as transparent as possible. If you see something in there with the plan or anything we're doing, and you're like, hey, I'd like to see this, then we'll have a box on there where you can shoot us an email, you can send us your thoughts. So everything we do, we want your input. Also on the website, like he said, we're going to have that crowdsource photography. So if you go out to, say, a park and you're like, hey, this is great, we want to see that, we want to know why and where you took it. Something that's really hideous, someplace you don't feel safe walking on the sidewalk maybe, please take a photo of that and upload it. You can upload up to 10 photos. But again, if you don't like to use a computer, you can just somehow just get us the photos, we'll upload them ourselves. So just turn those in with the survey. The last thing is a Crowdsource Map, and that on the website is like a big visual survey where you can drop pins with different options on, say, like, hey, I'd really love to see a bike path through this neighborhood, or I would love to see new housing development here. You can drop that on the map, and it's a very visual way for us to know what you're thinking, but also in the very end for everyone to see, like, hey, this is what other people are seeing in town and where. And as with all of this, this is going to be public at the very end, so everything that we've heard, everything that's on the website is going to be recorded so everyone can see that. So.
Thank you, Mason. So yeah, and I think, Lisa, you alluded to something over lunch today, and I don't know if I heard you right, but does the library have a place where we could have a computer where people could go also to take the survey?
Yeah, we can set that up.
Okay.
We did that as part of the transportation and parking plan, and I think we could talk to Amy, the director of the library, but the city staff is always very helpful with
Okay.
these big long-term plans.
I will caution people, please don't do this, but there's there's a toggle switch on SurveyMonkey. And I don't want to turn that toggle switch one way. And that is that if you turn it one way, only one person can answer from an IP address. I don't want that because that stops giving us the capabilities to set up a kiosk. So don't, if you're sitting at home and it's 105 out and you're bored, don't sit there and answer the survey 20 times just to load up things. We will be able to start telling, because we can see the IP addresses. But we will keep that toggle so that it's on where you can do more from one computer. So if a husband and wife want to do it from one computer at home, they can do that. The same with a kiosk at the library. Now, the information that's out there, if you're familiar with the concept of a QR code, and you're really good at a tablet, a smartphone, you can scan the QR code and answer it on your phone. So, you don't even have to be home to answer it. So, Greg, you said an hour, so we're getting... The next thing that I want to do, this is actually the last thing before Q&A. And I got to thank Chase for this, because as part of our contract with Chase, he put this 40-second video together, and I think it says a lot.
Our city is home, and home is where family is. Friends, entertainment. Home is where we grow. It's where we look back at what made us who we are. Home is also about looking to the future, to plan and build for what we want most. Home is security and comfort. It's knowing that you have what you need. Take part in making Hastings home.
So if you like that, give Chase a round of applause, because he did that very well. Now let's see if I can get back to the PowerPoint. Now let's see, can we just do it this way? There we go. With that, that kind of ends our talking as far as presenting. And I guess we've got a few minutes. If you get some basic Q&A or questions about the process, we're willing to answer some questions. We're all for it, willing and able to do so. So we do have a microphone that will float. So anybody have a question? Really, it's 100 and some degrees outside. She's coming to you with the microphone.
Voice working here. You know, one of my questions is we always talk about affordable housing. How in the world do we make housing affordable when prices just seem to, in a month, can jump so radically? And so with planning ahead, sometimes you look in areas, I go out to Colorado a lot and I see, smaller housing units, breaking down the lot size maybe, or going into an area where housing is dilapidated and needs some direction, maybe making places smaller, but boy, the dollar just doesn't go as far as it used to. So what do you guys see in the future?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. So part of the study will be looking at the entire gamut of possible solutions. Typically, the price, the zoning and subdivision and utility regulations add or account for 30 to 40% of the housing costs. So how can we, without compromising quality of life in the small town charm, how can we reduce those barriers to shave 10, 15, 20% off of that? And then also looking at lot sizes, design requirements, other financing tools that maybe not have been widely used, looking at also both the internal regulatory framework of Hastings government, but then also looking at the external partners who are helping, forward these goals, the CRA, the economic development agencies, our other regional partners that deal in housing, the bankers, et cetera. So yeah, housing is a challenge. It's not a new challenge. It's certainly been exacerbated since the pandemic and the price of materials fluctuating all over the place. And then also looking at ways of, is there a better way, or is there a way to build the base of contractors and developers? That's a challenge, particularly in the western part of the state. The base of contractors and developers, most home builders were family-owned businesses. And after the recession of 2008, wiped out 20 to 30% of them. And so we're seeing that all over the country, not just here. But we will be looking at all of the ranges of possible ways to increase production, lower price, but maintain the quality of life that everybody expects. I don't have a silver bullet answer yet.
Could you give a quick overview of your timeline?
The timeline right now is looking at probably, I've been telling people somewhere probably 14 to 18 months to get complete. The first element of this that you're going to see come out will be Aaron's part for the state. That's got the most critical timeline to it. As he said, it has some ramifications to your zoning if we're not careful. And I don't think you want those, because the state then starts dictating what you can and can't do in residential areas a little bit. A lot, he says. So.
In the past, I have seen different cities that do these small houses, like for one person or two people. Is that an option here in Hastings? Because I would think that would be more affordable.
Okay.
People who can't afford houses.
Okay. My opinion is yes, it's an option. My next question is, would it be acceptable? Because would the community accept those type of things in the area? Going back to your question about the affordability, the small town I live in, the city's doing a workforce housing subdivision right now, and our biggest contractor in town's coming in saying, your lots aren't big enough for the houses I build. And we're saying, I keep trying to tell him, that's the point.
Build a different house.
Build a different house. Build a smaller house. One that can be affordable. But there's this mentality that it's got to be a certain size, it's got to sit on a certain size lot, otherwise it's not a buildable house. So, we've got to change mentalities a little bit. And that is one option. I tell people, if you really, it's not a terrible book, but if you want to learn a little about housing is one of the things that really concerns you, there is a good book out there called The Missing Middle. And it talks about different ways of doing housing and different types of housing. You know what? There's nothing new about it. It's all stuff that was done pre-World War II. You've got a lot of examples in Hastings that I've photographed. And it's the idea of trying to get back to those type of concepts.
Bigger isn't always better.
Not always. You want to add anything?
Nope.
Okay.
Being you're working with Grand Island and Hastings, with the housing market, if you got a rental for rent, Hastings is, I got apartments in Hastings, and probably if you've got one that's open, I got probably 60 to 70% of the people that apply for that apartment are from Grand Island.
Okay.
So if they catch up on their housing, what's going to happen to the housing in Hastings?
I guess, well, the interesting thing is that Aaron and I are a part of, and Mason, we're a part of that team, and he's doing the exact same thing for Grand Island. And you can add to it, but I mean, the truth is, we are so far in the hole, it's going to be a long time, I think, before we dig ourselves out, fill our way back out of it.
Yep, you said what I was going to say.
Oh, okay. So I don't know that I would worry about that. I mean, you're also seeing a lot of people in Hastings move to Grand Island because they can't find anything here. And they're commuting down here. I've talked to 2 or 3 people this week that work in the city and they live in Grand Island. So.
Are they renting or do they own?
I don't know. We didn't get into that kind of detail. So, I don't know that this deficit is so huge. I don't know how it's going to be difficult to dig a way through it.
Well, I do know that renting in Hastings is a lot less than Grand Isle. I talked to a gal that was wanting to rent a 2-bedroom apartment, and she said she was paying $1,075 for a 2-bedroom, and you can get some here in Hastings for around $700.
Okay.
So that's part of the conflict.
Yeah.
We also heard when we were talking to folks in Grand Island that, how do I put this delicately, that there's more of a desire to build in Hastings than there is in Grand Island. And one of the challenges that Grand Island faces is that, at least for they think, is that you're housing their workforce. So there is, as Keith said, there is plenty of deficit to go around that needs to be solved. We could add 1,000 units online, and I don't think it's going to make, and there will still be a need for another 1,000, especially when we start looking at the Tri-Cities in aggregate. It's huge.
You know, when we were together, Aaron and I were together in Grand Island last month, you know, their housing study said they had a deficit of, 1,300 houses? Yeah. And just his quick look at the realtor stuff and Zillow, and his comment was there's a lot more need than what their document is. And that need is growing deeper and deeper every year because we're not bringing enough houses online.
And housing is an economic development issue these days, and I don't let anybody tell you differently.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
Hi, I was at your meeting yesterday morning as a council member, as liaisons from the chamber, and I think 3 of you are there, and it was a very robust conversation. Especially, I'm happy to say that the chamber now has a lot of younger people, and if you noticed, I was probably, if not the oldest, one of the oldest there. But so my enthusiasm for the young people to step forward and especially get involved with this now that we're going to have a new comprehensive plan. The one thing that probably I wasn't sure about was that we have several entities that really, I think, we need to step forward on. It doesn't matter whether it's the city council, the planning and zoning people, whether it's our developmental service office, whether it's Hastings Economic Development Corp., the CRA. We have a group of entities that I think really need to unite a little better than we have in the past. And by doing that, along with you, with your group in there, but I think we have to get very specific on who has to step forward on certain things. Who takes the lead out of our leadership in Hastings on housing? Who takes the lead on, industry? And so I just think we're fractured enough that I don't think we have enough strength, and I think we're going to need some major guidance there to be able to bring leadership forward to work with you to make sure we get to the goal of growth, prosperity, get rid of the image in Hastings that we're a no growth, not prosperous community. That's, it's a sad thing. Lived here for a long, long time, and I traveled the state in sales, and we were looked at as admired as a wonderful city to come and visit, and I think that still is. But everybody always says, why doesn't it grow? And so we really need help there and joining those groups together to find that right solution.
Okay, and it was a robust discussion, and I think you're right. I think we talked about that is there needs to be, all these groups need to come together and start doing that. And I think as we do more and more focus groups, we need to maybe start injecting different groups together a little bit. And definitely when we start looking at who's going to take the lead on different things for implementation, we need to sit down and have a group of people say, okay, we'll take the initiative on this. And the other groups say, we'll support you with that. So I think those are some of the things that we need to, and you're right. I've always heard the saying that Hastings is a no-growth community, but if you look at that chart, you've had some flat spots, but they're not terrible. You're not nose diving by any means, and all you got to do is drive through this community and you know that there is some prosperity in this community as well. So she's bringing a microphone over.
You'll have to do surprise meeting focus groups where you invite both groups to the same time, but they don't know they're meeting.
Yeah, why not?
Surprise.
Check your guns at the door. No, check your verbal guns at the door.
Check your verbs.
Hello. There's only one thing that I don't see included. And I guess I'm thinking about there's so many people that come forward for food assistance in Hastings, in the schools, and in Catholic services. And it's so surprising to me that, we have that big of a portion that need food assistance. So I wonder about, something, I don't know where it would fit or if it does not fit with what you're doing, but the poor in the community, it's not a question, I don't know, but I just know it is unsettling to me to understand that this many people need food assistance.
I think if it's going to fit somewhere, it's probably, that's in my mind, probably a public health issue because of if you're not getting enough food and that you're going to become malnourished and such. So I think that's probably where we're going to see that land.
And also in the housing chapter.
And also in the housing chapter, Aaron says.
Economic development.
Yeah, economic development.
You want to lift people up and have a
Community that's well-planned that can do that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really, that is a result of the failures of the system. And so how do we address food insecurity, housing insecurity, job insecurity to bring everybody up? So, yeah.
So if we get the housing, what kind of companies would come to Hastings and rent out an area?
Well, I guess my first thought is you got 800 jobs that need to be filled. That's where the first things, you got to fill the jobs you need filled right now, and then you can probably start worrying about what else to attract. These guys can chime in, but one of the things I keep hearing and one of the things I've noticed is that you don't see in a lot of towns this size is a very, very strong entrepreneurship endeavor in this community. You've got a downtown full of people that are taking risks, starting businesses, and that what you need to do, the best companies, and I could think of probably one or two exceptions, you guys celebrate Kool-Aid, but they left town in 1931. So they left town 91 years ago, but you're still celebrating them. That's a good thing. But some of the best businesses to have in your community are those that are homegrown. Because if they do it right and you work with them right, they are the most loyal ones to the community. I mean, I haven't looked at their history, but I assume Dutton Laneson, which is headquartered here, started here, it's thrived here, it's still here. So.
And I think another big part of that too is with Hastings College and the students that go there and the programs, is there enough jobs for them or the kind of housing after you graduate? It would seem like a lot of times there isn't, so hopefully those kind of jobs coming out of Hastings College, those students would want to stay with the housing as well.
So you say there's 800 jobs that aren't filled. So 5 years ago, you couldn't find a job. Why all of a sudden, besides COVID, has that happened?
I don't know that I have a good explanation for that. I mean, when Aaron and I did the housing study prior to COVID, we were still hearing the same things from economic development, that they were having trouble getting people to come to work. So, you know, it just may be the fact that some of these jobs that are open are skilled enough that they need special individuals to take over for it. You know, they can't just hire somebody off the street to do them. Anything else? Greg's still looking at his watch. Yes?
Something else I didn't see included in the plan was about how, if anything, is addressing childcare needs and quality childcare needs in our community.
That's going to be in all these chapters as well.
We find
economic development.
Yeah, we talked about it the other night actually with the young professionals group, the focus group, about how important childcare is to economic development. And getting, like, to get a family to move here, they want somewhere to put their kids while they go to work, you know, kind of thing. And they want it safe, and they want it licensed and clean and all those, especially if they're not familiar with the community. You know, somebody who's familiar might use an in-home and not think twice about it. Somebody who's not, or has two people working and needs, you know, can't take a day off when the babysitter's closed that day, they need a center, and they need spots. And they were saying there's waiting lists. The joke was like, yeah, once you before you tell your parents, put your name on a list at the daycare. So yeah, it's a huge economic development issue.
It is also when you put a child in daycare and it takes your whole paycheck to pay for that.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's horrible.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
I have a dog.
Aaron says that's why he has a dog. Anything else? If not, thank you for coming out. I was told that you guys are one of the bigger crowds that the city has seen in some of these meetings and studies lately. So I'm happy that you guys came out. And Greg,
You made it.
it is 8:01. So we try to keep the Planning Commission chair happy.
If you've got any one-on-one questions, we're going to be
Yep.
milling around, so feel free to ask any of us.